very warm welcome to another instalment from the channel that is Jono's Graveyard Jaunts. Now today's episode is about another true crime that occurred in the UK and became known as the Blazing Car Murder. For today's video, I'm in the beautiful county of Northamptonshire, which lies in the East Midlands. Specifically, I'm at St Edmund's Church, which is located in the picturesque village of Hardingstone, which in turn lies in the county of Northamptonshire. Now, the first map shows where the county of Northamptonshire sits in relation to the UK, and the second map shows where Hardingstone sits in relation to the county of Northamptonshire itself. Now, in today's episode, I shall be talking about a man by the name of Alfred Arthur Rouse in what became known as the Blazing Car Murder case. Now, Alfred Rouse was subsequently tried and hanged at Bedford Jail in 1930 for the crime. So who was Alfred Rouse then? Now, Alfred Rouse was born in Milkwood Road, Herne Hill, London on the 6th of April 1894, one of three children born to an English father and an Irish mother. His father, Walter, was a hosier, whereas his mother was reportedly an actress who deserted her husband and children in 1900. Following his wife's leaving the household, Rouse's father had very little time for his children, and consequently, Rouse and his two siblings were largely raised by an aunt on his father's side. Now, Rouse was known as a well-behaved child, and his siblings attended a local council school where he was regarded as a bright and an athletic student. Upon leaving school at age 14, Rouse worked briefly as an office boy for an estate agent, then found more secure employment at a textile manufacturing firm. He worked at this firm for 5 years before training as a carpenter, all the while furthering his education by attending numerous evening classes. In addition, Rouse had a substantial musical gift, sang well and learned how to play various musical instruments, becoming a proficient pianist, violinist and mandolinist. Rouse's exceptional baritone voice ensured that he regularly sang at his evening classes, and in 1909 Rouse obtained employment at a West End furniture manufacturer. Shortly afterwards he became acquainted with a young clerk by the name of Lily May Watkins, whom he first met at a local dance, with whom he began a relationship with. So, Alfred Arthur Rouse's wartime service. Just 4 days after the outbreak of World War I, Rouse enlisted in the British Army and was assigned to the 24th Queen's Regiment as a private. While training in England before his departure for France, Rouse married his fiancée. The ceremony was conducted at St Saviour's Church, St Albans, on the 29th of November. Rouse arrived in France on the 15th of March 1915 and was stationed in Paris for some weeks before his unit was sent into battle. He would serve with distinction, although he is known to have fathered an illegitimate child during this time. Furthermore, in the summer of 1930, he also purchased a 1928 Morris Minor. So the murder itself then. At approximately 1:50 in the morning on the 6th of November 1930, two young men returning from a Guy Fawkes night dance in the town of Northampton to their homes in the nearby village of Hardingstone saw a fire in the distance. As Guy Fawkes night had just passed, the men assumed the pie they could see in the distance was a bonfire. As they walked down Hardingstone Lane towards the fire in the direction of their homes, a neatly dressed man carrying an attache case passed in the opposite direction. When one of the young men remarked as to the blaze he could see in the distance, Rouse nodded and exclaimed, I quote, "It looks like somebody's having a bonfire up there," end of quote. He then walked past the two men before turning in the direction of the main Northampton to London road. The two men approached the fire only to discover the source of the flames was an actual Morris Minor ablaze in a verge at the side of the country lane, with the flames reaching up to 12 feet in height. Upon summoning the Hardingstone village constable, Harry Bertie Coping, and the parish constable to the scene, the four men extinguished the fire, with water from a nearby pond, only to discover a charred corpse lying across the front seats, with the charred remains of the head on the driver's seat and the right arm burnt off at the elbow. Constable Coping would later recollect he had initially believed the skull of the victim was actually a scorched rugby ball. Crucially, a wooden mallet was found near the car with 3 human hairs attached to the head. Although the fire had all but destroyed the vehicle, the number plate at the rear of the car was largely undamaged in the fire. Thus, police were quickly able to determine it belonged to one Alfred Arthur Rouse of Herne Hill. When the 2 young men informed investigators of their outcome with the man at the end of Hardingstone Lane, police issued an appeal in both the local and national press, urging the man to come forward and assist them with their inquiries. Now, the case itself was covered in detail in many national newspapers on the 7th of November 1930. A forensic examination of the vehicle revealed a joint on the feeding pipe between the petrol tank and the carburetor of the vehicle had been loosened before the fire had ignited, thus allowing petrol to freely stream both into and beneath the car, indicating the blaze had been deliberate. Moreover, spectroscopic tests conducted upon the victim's blood and a microscopic examination of his air passages revealed the victim had been alive, albeit unconscious, when the fire itself had started. Furthermore, he estimated to have died within 30 seconds of the onset of the fire. The victim himself was estimated to have been between 33 and 37 years old, and due to the condition of his lungs had likely worked in an extremely dusty atmosphere throughout his life. Now, police visited Rouse's friend Barnett's home to interview his wife. Now, Mrs. Rouse was able to confirm her husband had left home at approximately 8:30 p.m. on the 5th of November 1930 to attend a business meeting in Leicester, and that he had arrived home at this time, she incorrectly to believe approximately 2 a.m. the following morning, saying nothing. She was asked to accompany police to Northampton to assist in the identification of the victim. Now, due to the actual condition of the remains, she was not allowed to see the body, but instead asked to confirm whether she could identify scraps of clothing and a wallet containing 30 shillings, which had been found upon the victim. Now, Mrs. Rouse stated that items of clothing looked like those of her husband who had worn them, but she could not be certain. The wallet had definitely belonged to her husband, she revealed. Rouse himself had hitched a ride to London, arriving at his friend Barnett's home at approximately 6:20 a.m. He remained at his home for just 30 minutes before travelling by train to Glamorganshire to meet with Phyllis Jenkins, whom he had earlier promised to marry. When Jenkins asked Rouse where his car was, he replied it had been stolen in Northamptonshire the previous day, and that this was why it had taken him 18 hours to reach her. He assured Jenkins that he had reported the theft to both the police and his insurance company. Now, early the following morning, Rouse's mistress showed him a newspaper displaying an image of his burnt-out car, which is speculated as to whether the deceased occupant had been the owner of the vehicle, and questioning whether he had been murdered. In response, Rouse denied the car was his before announcing his intentions to travel by coach to Hammersmith Broadway at 10 a.m. He boarded a coach at Carvis destined for Hammersmith Broadway. When Rouse's coach had departed, Jenkins informed local police that Rouse had been at her house and of his intended destination. They in turn informed the Metropolitan Police Service as to his whereabouts. Consequently, that evening, Rouse was arrested at Hammersmith Coach Terminal by Detective Sergeant Skelly of the Metropolitan Police, who had been waiting for him at the coach terminal. At Hammersmith Police Station, Rouse was informed that officers from Northamptonshire Police were already travelling to Hammersmith to interview him. In response, Rouse offered a rambling statement in which he claimed his victim was a hitchhiker he had encountered near St Albans and who had actually set his vehicle alight while he, Rouse, had left his vehicle to relieve himself. Rouse further claimed he was travelling to Scotland Yard to confess to his crime at the time of his arrest, adding, and I quote, "I'm glad it's all over. I was going to Scotland Yard about it. I was responsible. I have had no sleep." Upon arrival at Northamptonshire police officers, Rouse was cautioned and driven to Northampton Police Station. On the 27th of November, Rouse appeared at Northampton Assizes to be formally charged with the murder of an unknown man. He was remanded in custody until the 3rd of December of 1930, and on this date, a formal trial date of 26th of January 1931 was set. Now, the trial itself of Alfred Rouse began at Northampton in the Winter Assizes on the 26th of January 1931, and he was tried before Mr. Justice Talbot. The chief prosecuting counsel for the Crown was William Norbert Burkitt, KC. He was assisted by Richard Elwes. The chief defence counsel was Donald Finnemore, who was assisted by A.P. Marshall. And on this date, Rouse formally pleaded not guilty to the charge of murder of an unknown man. Now, the trial lasted just 6 days. In a final address to the jury, Mr. Justice Talbot stated this: "Of course, there can be no doubt about these facts create grave suspicion against this man who was the owner of the car and who drove it to the place where it was burned. If he is an innocent man, he has created a grave suspicion against himself by his own folly." End of quote. Now, the jury debated for just 25 minutes before reaching their verdict. Rouse was unanimously found guilty of murder and sentenced to death on the 31st of January 1931. Having calmly heard the verdict just prior to the sentence of death being imposed, Rouse firmly declared to Mr. Justice Talbot, "I'm innocent, sir." Rouse did lodge an appeal against his conviction, primarily contending immoral character evidence had been submitted at his trial, and this had influenced the jury. His appeal was heard on the 23rd of February 1931, although it would prove unsuccessful. On Tuesday, the 10th of March 1931, Rouse was hanged in Bedford Jail. He was hanged by the famous executioner Albert Pierpoint. In the days prior to his execution, his legal wife and 2 of his mistresses alternatively visited him to bid him a final farewell. Now, Rouse never formally admitted to his guilt to the murder of his victim to the police, although shortly before his execution, he did write a letter to the Daily Sketch in which he confessed his guilt. In this written confession, Rouse stated that initially he had resisted the thoughts he had initially developed that summer to commit a murder in which he could fabricate his own death. Although a chance encounter with unknown victim outside a London pub in the autumn of 1931 had led him to rethink his plans. Now, the body of Rouse's victim was interred in a grave marked with a simple cross bearing the inscription "In memory of an unknown man, died November the 6th, 1930, in the grounds of St Edmund's Church in Hardingstone, Northamptonshire." A metal box containing several newspaper accounts of Rouse's trial was buried with the victim. Now, a new cross was erected in the grave in August of 2022 because the old one had perished. Prior to his execution, Rouse refused to assist the police in establishing the identity of his victim, simply stating his belief he should not assist officers in this task as they have not helped me, I quote. He did, however, offer a general description of his victim's identity. Rouse claimed the man he killed had been 40 years of age, between 5'6" and 5'8" tall, respectively dressed in a light-coloured overcoat with the general appearance of a clerk. The man also had, I quote, a slight brogue and had a boxing or sporting tattoo on his right forearm. Furthermore, he had been wearing police boots, which Rouse claimed the man had informed him he had been given to by London police. The man also carried a sports diary. So this is the final resting place of the unknown man, who was found in a burnt-out 1928 Morris Minor on Hardingston Lane that actually belonged to Alfred Rouse, who was convicted and subsequently hung for the murder
of the unknown man. He was hung at Bedford Jail in 1931. Now, even with genetic fingerprinting that was pioneered actually at Leicester University by the then Dr. Alec Jeffreys, now Professor or Sir Alec Jeffreys, they couldn't basically determine from the evidence that they had who this person was. The various people came forward, but there was no match, so sadly he's remained to this present day, you know, the unknown man, but he will always be remembered as the blazing car murder. So this was erected actually in August 2022, this cross, because I'm guessing the other one had perished significantly. So we're actually at St Edmund's Church in the beautiful village of Hardingstone in Northamptonshire. Rest in peace, God bless.
That concludes the video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, subscribe and comment on the video.